Welcome, everybody. It's another Lokalise study group session. I am so excited to see so many people on this call. This is amazing. My name's Marina Grayson Farrell. I've started this study group with all of you colleagues, translators, localization professionals, and everybody in between. And we're learning the tools. There's like 800 on a chart. We're learning the tools together. And today we have a really special demonstration and Q&A with our people from Lokalise. Today we're going to hear from Mario Guzman. He's a localization consultant at Lokalise. Say hi, Mario.
Hi, everyone. Saying hi from the Dominican Republic, the Caribbean here.
Very cool. Is it warm out there today?
Very, very warm. Very nice weather.
Very nice weather. So Mario, as a localization consultant, sales enthusiast, former pro basketball player. How interesting. So you're going to help us take a look at your product today. And Eric Silberstein with L10N Technology Sales, asking questions and building relationships. Welcome, Eric. Say hi, Eric.
Hi, everyone. So nice to meet you all, and thanks for having us.
Excellent. We'll get started. So today's demonstration is going to have tips and a demo and probably some workflows that you're really going to want to pay attention to. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A and get a chance for everybody to ask and then finding out how they can try Lokalise for themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the spotlight over to you. And when I do presentation mode, whoever is speaking will have the spotlight. Welcome, Eric.
Hi, everyone. Marina, thank you for this opportunity to join you today and present Lokalise. I was actually at last week's meeting when we talked about project management tools, and it was almost serendipitous that now we get to present today. Mario, I know I want to give you some time to speak before I get into the tool because I'll be speaking a lot and I want to preserve my voice. Maybe you can do the introduction for Lokalise and give the high-level overview to begin with.
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I believe I speak for the whole family at Lokalise when I say, and I think Eric can vouch for me, that we are very grateful to be here, have this opportunity, and for you guys giving us this time. I mean, especially for those who are in the Pacific Eastern time zone, making that extra effort. Truly appreciate it. And a cool thing about how this all came up was about the collaboration and how seamless everything was structured for this to happen today. And I think Lokalise, that's what it intends when it comes to workflows, right? We're trying to automate as much as we can, make it as seamless and effortless for all localization teams out there to be able to manage their projects and translations. And that's what Eric will showcase for you today. He's one of our rockstar sales engineers. And yeah, very excited to hear your feedback, positive or negative. Please do not hold back. It just makes us better. And yeah, Eric, take it away, man.
And I saw in the chat, there are people from all over the world joining us. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to share Montana. I'm excited to share Lokalise with you today. I put together a short agenda and I'll share that with you first so you know what to expect. So we're gonna first look at a diagram and talk about a design-led localization workflow. Localization is somewhat of a collaboration tool, TMS. So it can connect with tools that designers use, tools that project managers use, and tools that developers use as well. And I intend to show you two of those integrations today. So we'll start by looking at Figma and how we can push content from Figma into Lokalise. I'll configure some automations so we can immediately, with machine translation, translate that content from the base language to various target languages, and then view it in Figma. So we can do what might be a visual QA. We can create key name framework. I'm not sharing my screen yet, though. I'm not yet. So we could pass that content on to our developers or onto our marketing teams. After we have our visual QA done in Figma, I'm going to jump back in Lokalise and we'll go through a standard translation, editing, proofreading process. Once we complete a real translation workflow, I'll push the content into GitHub where developers can see the diff or the changes made, and then they could decide to pull that commit into their main branch or send it back to the reviewers, however they would handle translated content before and bring it into their code base. So without further ado, thank you once again for having us. Quite nervous. I've never given a demo to 55 people before, so I'm going to do my very best. At any point, if you have a question, I'll open up for questions at the end and beginning of each different step in this workflow, but I will limit them in those moments to at least continue with the general flow so we can get to the very end. There will be question and answers at the end as well. So just like Marina said, to give you context on the workflow I'll share with you today is one that's design-led. So we call it a localized design stage localization. It will involve designers working directly with whoever the localization owner is, as well as the developers. This is a very common workflow that many of our customers that are localizing software, either mobile or web apps, use if they start the localization process at the onset of product development. So we're going to begin first in Figma, our step one. I'll open my Figma screen. I'll select content and I'm going to push it to localize. It's going to follow this arrow and it's going to arrive in localize. Before I move into our TMS, I'm going to generate a duplicate page showing all of the key names. And if we're unfamiliar, maybe we have translators here who haven't done software translation before. We'll talk about what a key name is and how we work with them in localize. We'll generate a wireframe that we can share with our developers so that they can begin creating the actual design page within the app in code without having the translations. After we push our keys and base language into localize, we're going to run a machine translation automation, and we're going to pull that content back into Figma so we can do a visual QA. Furthermore, after I configure these automations, I'll then push another screen from Figma to localize, and I'll immediately generate a copy so I can do immediate live QA, which almost feels like magic. After we've gone through a live QA, a visual QA, we'll jump into localize. And the third thing we're going to do is generate a task TEP workflow, and we'll follow it from start to finish. I suppose that after the TEP is done, it might go through a review process internally, but we'll skip that. Instead, we'll imagine that this content is ready to move maybe onto the development or staging environment in our code bases and in the hands of our developers. So afterwards, I'm going to configure my connection with GitHub, and I'm going to export those files to production in some way. We're going to do it with GitHub. Finally, once we're in GitHub, we'll check the diff, we'll see where that content goes, and we'll conclude with our design stage localization workflow. Lokalise is an extremely flexible tool. I've had the privilege of working with many great tools. I'm very familiar with MemSource, very familiar with Plunet as well. And Lokalise, we'll see, behaves differently. It requires a different frame of mind for use. And we'll see how Lokalise behaves and organizes content and data in just a moment. So our first step then is to jump into Figma. Here I am, and this is our example app that our designers have worked very hard on. It has 4 pages. I'm going to connect with Lokalise for my plugin. And I'm going to generate an entirely new project. So this is the localization advocate group. I'm going to go through some of these settings that aren't very important for the demo. And I'll finish that up. Now I've just created a project with Lokalise and it's empty. It has no keys in it yet at this point. I want to send this content to my TMS. So I'll select export, choose relevant settings, and send my content. Actually, I wanted to open Lokalise. Let me do that one more time so that I can open Lokalise. If you're a translator and you've been assigned to work on a software project, sometimes context is missing. Key names don't reveal perhaps the meaning behind what the translation should be. So when we export content from Figma, we have a couple of benefits, and that is assigning screenshots to each key. So what you're seeing now is the home editor page. It's where we can see all of the translations and content we have within a localized project. On our left, we have the key name in this column, the platforms the key is assigned to. We can add a tag for organizing this metadata. Just add a tag there. And we see that the content came from Figma. Our translators, our project managers, anyone with permissions within a project can click on a screenshot and see exactly where that key and key value appears on a page. So what is a key? If you're hearing this term for the first time and you are an experienced translator or someone just getting into the industry, the term key is mostly used for localization projects that involve software. A key is something like a value in code that can be injected and replacing hard-coded strings, so that maybe the default English. Then when your user activates a certain language, perhaps the browser notifies the app that my settings are Spanish, that key value in Spanish is fetched instead of the key value in English. So in order for that swap to be possible, we inject these key names and replace the hard-coded strings. For our project, let's translate into a few of the languages some of us speak here. So I know Mario is in the Dominican Republic, so we'll do Spanish, if I could type it right. Which other languages do we speak? Who else is representing today? Write one in the chat. German.
Polish,
Polish.
French,
I heard French. Let's do one more. And
Lithuanian.
Portuguese. Oh, I saw Romanian. I don't want to leave anyone out, but we'll do. That's where we'll stop today. Arabic. Arabic would be nice, just so we can have a right to left languages.
Yes.
All right, that's where the buck stops. I'll add them. So we have this new view. We see all of our English and all of our translation values. But I told you, step one is we're going to run machine translation, pull the content back into Figma so we can run a visual QA, as well as share a wireframe of the key names with developers. So I'm going to do something very quick. That's very easy. Create automation rules. I'm going to automate for all languages, and we're going to run machine translation. We also have the option to pseudo localize. Let's run machine translation. See if it apply. Now immediately all my content will be translated. The quality of the translations, I'm not going to vouch for it. It comes directly from Google's API, and it looks like it worked correctly. Back in Figma, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a page copy with the key names. And at the same time, I'm going to create a copy of all languages except for English. Perfect. So thinking now from the developer's perspective, I can push content into Lokalise and it will be machine translated immediately. Then I can generate these pages and share them with the relevant parties. For example, that might be useful with this master keys duplicate page. We've replaced the hard-coded English content from our Figma master file or master page, and we can see the key names. So our developers know exactly where on the page the key names should be. This might be helpful for them. Also, if I switch to German, I can see perhaps where my content is truncated or where it's gone from 1 line to 2 lines. I can switch to French. And the most interesting language for us today with this design will be Arabic. Oh, and sometimes it does this. That's disappointing. Let's go to master and switch language so we can see Arabic. So here we have right to left, and I know there's an Arabic speaker here with us today. This probably does not look right. Content, we didn't internationalize our design so the content could switch from right to left. So if I knew we were doing right to left ahead of time, I could have made, for example, I could have made this box run the entire length of the page so I could easily click right to left alignment instead of left to right. That's just the example I wanted to share. I'm going to turn my main page back to English before I get my wires crossed. Now for the cool part, we set up those automations. I'm now ready to prepare this page for localization. Actually, I'm ready to prepare all three of these. I'm going to export them, and they'll go into Lokalise, and those automations will be run. Now, if I come to my master key page update page, I have to do this, or I have to regenerate the page. Let me regenerate the page. Yeah, let's remake copies, languages, all create. All of that content will now be translated. So we have all 4 pages that can go through a visual quality assurance that we can share with our developers, our marketing team, maybe anyone who wants to create a wireframe, post it on LinkedIn, create a cool video. You can even click through these screens within Figma and move from one to another, like a phone or the app might behave. So that wraps up our first part. We pushed our keys and base languages into Lokalise. We shared a wireframe with the development team, and we also did a very brief and visual quality assurance just to see where the design might break or how we could more internationalize our design. So to streamline the localization process into X amount of languages. The next, I guess, perspective we'll jump into is that of the localization project manager. The machine translation is, as all of us know, by no means ready for production. And if we were to send that content to our end users, it would be not good. It would not be a good experience for them, might even do damage to our brand. So what we want to do now is put this content through a true TEP workflow. What I think I like about Lokalise, coming from a position as a translation project manager, is that I want to remove the machine translation, is that how flexible it is for translations. It is vendor agnostic, so I can assign translations to I'm not supporting this idea, but I could assign translations to an internal team member that is not a professional translator. Or just because you drive a car does not make you a race car driver. Just because I'm bilingual doesn't make me a translator. But if money's tight, that's an option. I can also send this content directly to a localized vendor through an order form we have on Lokalise. Or I can onboard individual freelancers or an LSP into my Lokalise project. The options are limitless. When we do have team members in our project, we can filter for all of the keys using perhaps tags, key name values that appear within our content, so that we can just send some keys to the translation process. And we can create a task once we define the scope of the task. My scope now is all of the keys. And I'm going to call this TEP workflow translation. I'll write a description, I'll choose my task type, select the due date, and then choose task options. Now I can choose my assignees. I'm just going to do Spanish because I speak Spanish, and we only need one language to show you how to go through this workflow step. And at the same time now, I also want to create a review task. So we have the T of the TEP process. And now this is going to be review. Task options, block translations, sure. And there we go. So just created a 2-step translation process. What do our translators see? Now, Lokalise integrates with many project management tools. So you could receive a Slack message that this task has been created and it's assigned to you. You could receive an email, a Discord message, or a ticket in Jira might be created. And I'm remembering now that I broke one of my promises, and that is to stop at different points in the demo and ask you guys if you have any questions. So Before I jump into the view that a translator will see within Lokalise, I'd like to open the floor to hear from you all. Do you have any questions so far? Anything that is interesting to you?
Checking the group now. Let's see. Any questions? You can put it in chat or go ahead and.
All right, I'll wait a few more moments.
Okay. Oh, here's a question. If you see in the chat.
Okay, so how can another team member connect to a project? Does Figma have the ability to generate the resource files, and where do the key names come from? So for Yuka's question, the latter question, we'll get to that within the demo, and I'll show you how we can generate resource files with Figma to Lokalise. My knowledge of what Figma is capable of generating is limited. I think you can download those pages to share them with team members. Maybe someone in the chat is very familiar with Figma and can answer Yuka's question. If you're that someone, please do. Where did the key names come from? The key names, when sent from Figma, come from a key naming pattern based on the element names of the content in Figma. I realized I just threw out a word sandwich. So what it means is when I generated my key names in Lokalise, I used a key naming pattern, and it was based off of the, what's this called? The design name or the artboard name, so sign up page, like right here. And then I believe it went to group name and then element name. So that was the key naming pattern I used to get content from Figma into Lokalise. And how can another team project connect to the project? With Lokalise, it's very simple. You open the contributors tab, write the email of the person you'd like to invite, configure their settings. And if they're a translator, you can select their reference languages and contributable languages. If once you send them the invite, they'll go through the process and they can join your team that way. And for the last, before I move on, the wireframes that are created in Figma can be shared directly with your developers. You can download the images, I believe, and share. As well with Lokalise, I could export those key names and key values only in English to share with them. So, and can Lokalise work on African languages like Hausa? All right, this is the last one, but that one intrigued me because I don't work with African languages. And I know it can. We can add the language quite easy to Lokalise by selecting here, Hausa. And if there isn't a language that Lokalise works with, you can even create custom languages. So I use a custom language to create back translation workflows. All right, if there's any question I didn't answer, please remember your question so we can answer it at our next stop. I was just about to get into what does Lokalise look like for translators? So if I'm the translator and I receive the request to translate into Spanish, what I've just done is I've opened the scope of the task within my project. And a translator will see the content like this. On the left, you have your base language value. This is very typical of CAT tools. And on the right, your translation value. So if I'm going through and I'm writing for forgot password and I need to see the context, I can click in and see where it's highlighted on my Figma page. And furthermore, if you are a project manager and you're okay with allowing your contributors to access machine translation suggestions for efficiency purposes, if that's enabled, they can come here and see what are some machine translation suggestions. So say te olvido tu contraseña, for me, that's okay for this demo, or I could go off of a prior translation memory match. So I know these are 100%. Let's preserve what we've used before for consistency purposes and include that content. Meet Lokalise, conocer Lokalise. I can also use shortcuts, so log in with SSO. I'm just gonna do iniciar sesión con SSO, like it says there, Control Enter. And I could go through until we finish this task. For time purposes, I'm going to use my bulk editor and translate this task. And then I'm going to do that because the view that a reviewer will see will be the exact same. So I don't want to show you the same things twice. So in my imagination, I go through all of this content and I translate it. Let's jump back into our multilingual view. And imagine we had done the tasks, assigned those tasks to translators in all languages. And I'm going to apply my machine translation for 100% matches as well as automation. So all the content will now be translated by TM or MT. It did just TM. Reload page to see the changes. And so we have a clean project. I'm going to run my MT automation as well because I don't want to leave any languages left untranslated. This will update in a moment. I wonder if Google MT has data for Hausa. All right, the demo gods are against me today. Let's move on. There it goes. Thank you. So we just finished our translation, went through the whole TEP process. We were notified either via Jira, Discord, Slack, email when our translators finished. The reviewers received notifications when the translation was finished so they could begin immediately. Standard stuff for CAT tools and TMS tools. Now the question is, what do we do with this content? Well, for our designers, what they can do, if we come back to these master pages, they only have to click update page and they can see changes made from the last point that we had made changes. So the new updates will be uploaded. Uh-oh, and we have some truncation here. So we got to send that back to translation. But what I'm interested at this point is showing you this final step. If we assume that the translation is of great quality, it's gone through the appropriate internal approval review process, we can now push it to the next stakeholders. And for many of our customers, those are developers. Our developers are working within their repositories, Git environments, their coding environments. And in many cases, they don't want to go into Lokalise. They want to stay within the environments they're comfortable working in and export translations there in an automated and simple way. They can do that various ways. We have a command line interface tool. Just take some parameters like project type and authentication code, and they can push or download files into their repository. They can also use what's called API or application programming interface. It's how apps communicate to each other. So they can make an API call to move content to their repo or just download directly to their local machine. What I'm going to show you today is how we can, the user interface, send this content to my demo Git repository. So I go to download. And at this point, I think Lokalise is interesting and differentiates itself from more traditional CAT tools. MemSource is a fantastic and powerful tool. Well, I mean to say phrase TMS is a fantastic and powerful tool. And phrase strings behaves differently, but with those traditional TMSs that are based at, or basically operate at a file level, I can only export a file. I can't go through the database of all my content and choose what to export. Lokalise stores content in a flat structure. So when it's time to retrieve it, I have to rely on metadata or other things in order to pick through all of my data with a fine-tooth comb and choose exactly what I want. And it's this way so that it can function efficiently with developers with their API and CLI. So they can easily pick from all of the content at once and grab exactly what they need, almost with a surgeon's precision. So I'm going to export all of this content. I'm choosing my file type for Apple strings for my Apple iOS, include all platform keys. I can choose file structure. I can go through all of these settings and content to export. So if I added tags to certain keys, I could select them here. I can exclude tags at the key level. I can include just keys from a certain file that have that file name attached to them. Or I could, I didn't talk about it, but filter based on translation status. So individual translations belonging to a key as they go through the review and translation process are assigned a translation status, reviewed, verified, or a custom one, which has no limits. You can write in any text for a custom translation status. So I'm the developer. I've chosen which content I want to pull into my repository. At this point, oh, I didn't even Didn't even link my repository to my app, silly me. Let's do that really quick. I use GitHub personally. I'm gonna reuse my credentials, and establishing a connection with the repository is very easy. I choose my name, the branch I'm working in, the platforms that will be imported, and I don't need to include that. At this point, I can select which files to monitor and to connect with Lokalise. And Lokalise can only connect with localization resource files. So I can't connect to this repo and actually pull from my code, like my index file or any of my app files or components. Instead, I can only access content specific to localization. So for the demo purpose, I would go into my EN folder. Maybe I'll grab this and also the EN.json folder within product one. I'd hit confirm. Now Lokalise is connected to those resource folders. I can pull that content into Lokalise and push that content back. But that's not what we're doing with our workflow. Instead, we've got this content from Figma, and we want our developers, we want to give them now, pass it off to them. So app triggers, GitHub. I choose the repository and I write a commit message, add translations for design pages XX and YY. I'm going to preview it just to make sure it has all the content. See, glad I previewed it. What did I leave out? Content to export, data all. Why did it do that? Because I don't have there. Now it'll work. So I hit preview again. And now we have all of the language files ready to be exported to our repository. So here's our English. It's been given this file name, Arabic, French, German, Hausa, Polish, Portuguese, Romanian, and Spanish. We haven't sent it to our repository yet, though. Now we have. So now talking from the perspective of a developer, I'm working on a very complex repo. I don't want my code to be messed with. It needs to go through a certain review process. So Lokalise creates what is called a pull request. Pull request is its own, it creates a branch and requests to merge that branch with the GitHub main branch where our production code lives and is being used. So I can open this pull request and the commit, and now I can compare all of the changes. So because these files are brand new, I can see green knowing, and I know that all of this is new content. But if I had made changes to these files, I would see the diff. So I might see a red line where content was deleted. And this is where our developers can review the code, approve changes, or ask some clarifying questions. So I review the code. Oh, perfect. Went through, it's just the greatest translation ever. I love it. I want to pull it and commit it to my main. So I'm going to go, just the fastest way to do it is if I come here, open this, I can leave a comment, committed, because it's so good. Perfect. I can merge the pull requests. Oh, maybe I should have wrote that above. There we go. And now the content is in my main branch of my repository. So quick, one final review of everything we showed today. And Lokalise is not limited to this workflow in any way. It's just a very, very popular one. Is we created content in Figma, pushed it into Lokalise, and use automations to machine translate it. We could have also pseudo-localized that content, pulled it back into Figma, shared the new key names with our developers, did a visual QA to see where content would be truncated or lines need to be adjusted. We saw that Arabic's right to left didn't immediately jump over to the right side of the screen. So if we're going into 20 languages and we have to work through these errors within each language, and our developers have to make changes for each language, the lift we can do in pre-production or preparing our files will save us so much time and effort. So we're going to internationalize our design files with what we learned from the quality assurance, visual quality assurance. Then we went into Lokalise, did a full TEP workflow. And when those translations were approved internally by our team, we passed the baton off to a developer so that they could review the changes, see the diff, and eventually merge them into their main branch for use in this new app we've created. I'm seeing this is a great point now to stop and take questions. So I see a few ones were added. The last thing I wanted to show you, and it's just a second, is how we can start free trials. So if you're learning tools, you're getting into the industry, you're maybe even evaluating tools at the moment, you can sign up for a free trial and you have access to our enterprise level. So every single app integration, access to content management systems like Contentful and HubSpot, Figma, as well as Adobe XD, the design tool, Slack, all of the integrations that we have are made available to you for 14 days. So you can put Lokalise, push it to the limits for 14 days and try every single feature, and it's absolutely free. If you're a translator too, and you're maybe just need to manage a few files in your personal life, once the 14 days ends, you are stuck with a simpler version. So with that simpler version, you can still actually go through the translation workflows, but now features are limited. Absolutely free, takes a second to set up. And if you really want to learn about Lokalise to use it to its max potential, we have free courses set up about localization in general, as well as crash course in using Lokalise, and they can be accessed. Am I going too fast? I click so quickly. It can be accessed within resources library, and you can go to the blog too for other content.
That's great. And I see there's some questions now showing up in chat.
I'm going to start at the top. So Piero, I see yours, but the last I see is Yuka. So this workflow works if your dev team use the output from the Lokalise and the English string key matches, right? Make sure I understand this workflow works. Your dev team uses the output from Lokalise and the English. Yuka, I understand your question to be that the workflow works and that the content can be imported into the app successfully as long as the key names and key values match. Please chime into the conversation verbally if you can and help me understand your question and let me know if I've got it right.
Yeah, so basically, the software localization model that I'm used to is really starting out with resource files, whether it's JSON or, anything else, right? But, since we're starting out from Figma, which is the design stage, and resource file has not been generated just yet. So now you're creating resource files from Lokalise, and they're already translated, right? So I'm wondering, how is not a disconnect with the development team if they're actually building the resource files on the English side, and then now you're generating the translated files, the translated resource files from Lokalise, from Figma. So how do you reconcile the differences?
Yeah, very good question. I understand very clearly now what you're asking is. Yes, we did generate the content from Figma. The hypothetical scenario was we're developing this app for the first time. So at that point, the developers, perhaps they've decided they don't want ownership, and the design team would have ownership with generating the translations and then sharing with the developers. What if, of course, the repo files already existed, right? The app's already been produced, it's already been in development for 2 years, and they've created these repo files. When I connect it to GitHub, I have the option to pull those resource files into Lokalise. Then what we could do, if we want to connect it to Figma or not, is we could go through a standard workflow and push back to GitHub. But if we want to connect to Figma, we have the options within the plugin to link translations to already existing keys. So if we still have those Figma design files laying around, and we want to give context to our translators now, I'd pull from a repository, run the Figma demo, and instead of creating missing keys, I would link them to the existing ones. Albeit this process is prone to machine error. Sometimes the keys can't be found in the images, but screenshots would be generated, many keys would be linked, and whatever was missed could be linked by the project managers if they thought it was a viable way to spend their time. But too long didn't read is, yeah, you can go from the repo first and then link to Figma, or just go pull from the repo and already existing localization files. You can even pull the target languages files and they would be paired up to the same key name and Lokalise. So you could build out your translation memory before beginning to translate.
Okay, so if you're starting out the new design and you're starting out in Figma, and if you go with this workflow, you are also generating English, the main source resource file as well, right? And then you have agreement with the development team that, okay, we're going to use JSON, or we're going to use Apple, string file, or whatever that is. Like, we have to know what the development team is looking for, right? And then you
Exactly.
basically create it in that format. And
Yeah.
in effect, you are not just generating the translated files, but you're also generating the English source resource file as well. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely. And you touched on a very important point for localization managers that do work with interdepartmentally, and that would be alignment, aligning ahead of time on key naming patterns, how the developers would like to receive that content, and in what file format. So I thought your question was very valuable for the group, Yuka, but I need to move on to the next one. Thank you for
Very
sharing.
interesting. Thank you.
What does the LPM do if there's a change on the dev side? This is from Pedrosa. Pedrosa, where are you? Tell us a little bit more about your question.
May have to move on if we don't get that response. And remember, everybody, if questions aren't answered, we can submit to Eric and Mario for follow-up later. All right.
Well, if there is a change on the dev side, let's imagine they made a change to the English content. They're English developers, they will only handle the English content, or perhaps they have ownership over it. What they can do is they can make change to the GitHub resource file, or the resource file stored in their repository. My example with GitHub. And then you saw me establish a connection with my repository in that language file. They could pull that entire file from the repository and replace any keys that have been modified without modifying any keys that have not changed since that point. So the dev team can also push changes to Lokalise without changing keys that don't need any changes. I use the word change way too much. I'm turning my head around with all these changes. I hope that answered your question. So Piero, do you offer
Excuse me,
academic?
can I just ask, following this question, is this something that is automated? The pushing the changes that have been made on the developer side to the translation side?
Out of the box, that actually can be automated. We have what's called auto pull. So any change made to a resource file that's been imported and is being monitored by this auto pull feature, the changes will propagate. That can include adding a key or changing a key. Furthermore, Lokalise has, I think our API is one of our strongest features. Content can be a combination of API and webhooks. Our customers create microservices that are always monitoring for events that happen in Lokalise and then automating a specific action. So it's very common to create an API and webhook microservice that's listening for the completion of tasks and grabbing all of the keys in that task, bundling them together and pushing them to their desired ending place. So their opportunity for custom integrations is also a highly used feature.
Okay.
Good question,
Thanks.
though. The auto pull feature, it's a nice one. I wish we offered academic licenses. I know our team, we have a partnership team that is trying to partner with certain schools. So that's information that you can follow up with Mario and he'll share the communication information. As a matter of fact, if we have a partnership representative on this call from Lokalise, I'll pause for a moment and chime in with an answer or share what you may know.
Thank you.
Okay, no partnership from Lokalise here, but Mario, can you follow up with Piero and share that information with him?
Sure thing.
In case he's interested. Perfect.
Cool.
Yasmin, it only uses Google Translate. Out of the box, Lokalise automations can use Google or DeepL. And then within my editor, we saw that I could choose from Google DeepL or Microsoft. But for the automations, just those two. Lokalise does, though, allow for custom integrations with third-party MT engines. So if our customers are training engines and they want to use that content, they just find the right moment within a workflow to inject content from the machine translation into the keys. And that's how they use their third-party machine translation engine. Does Lokalise support LQA features? Can a reviewer log errors and assign severities inside the tool to assess the quality of the translation? This is something I really want Lokalise to have, but at the moment, we rely on third-party apps and integrations to provide LQA features. So no, there are no built-in LQA features. We don't support any frameworks like MQM, but there are workarounds and partners of Lokalise that have a product that does just that. Okay, I'm trying to scroll down to read other questions, but my Zoom meeting chat has frozen. Marina, perhaps you see the next question?
Yep, let me take a look here. Okay, all the way down. Oh, there's so many things on the chat. Let's see, we have, does Lokalise support LQA features? Did you address that one?
Yeah,
Florencia? Did you see accessibility templates? Sama?
That would be the last question, Eric. What about accessibility templates?
And I'm not quite sure exactly in what context. Do you mean accessibility templates provided in Figma or in something else? Accessibility meaning the best ways for accessibility design? I think we need a little context around that question, Sama.
Yeah, the one supported in Figma, sorry. For example, if I am using, I don't know, JSON based or something, usually we add an accessibility key, not key. The key itself will be the normal template, and then we will add an accessibility feature. So, for example, it will be more description or clearer words or something like this.
Like alternative text, a place to provide more context for
Exactly.
that. And are you asking that the accessibility feature have translation, or the tool can actually get into that?
Yes, exactly. If it will read it or not. For example, it's not supported in Android, but if you are using a browser, it's there already.
Eric, are you here?
I just got back in, but I can't see the meeting chat from before I rejoined.
Yes, Sam, can you ask the question again, please?
Yes, please.
Okay, my question was about the accessibility template. So we are using the ICU, for example. So currently we have the key, which is the normal template. And we have also another, let's say, not the key, it's under the same key, which called accessibility template with another text or a clearer text. So that was my question, if Figma is supporting something like this, or what it's going with it in this case.
I wish I had the answer for you. So I'm not as knowledgeable on Figma as I am on Lokalise. I do know, can speak on Lokalise behalf, that if Figma if it's generated as its own element, then it can be sent into Lokalise. And if it has its own key name within your web app or website, it can be sent into Lokalise. Furthermore, if you send HTML to Lokalise and that accessibility string is there as like an alternative or description, the HTML parser will grab it and translators can translate it. But I wish I knew more about Figma.
Actually, that's a good point, though. And I think that's a good note to everybody. If you're having best practices and you're conscious of accessibility issues, you should pay attention to how the files are staged, and you want to make sure accessibility, because that's something the designer needs to be aware of, to write descriptive text that's descriptive enough for somebody who has vision issues or all that. So I think that's a great question, but this is more geared to the product itself. So I hope that answers your question, Sime.
And it talks about a bigger theme, like how can we as localization professionals advocate for best practices? If that workflow I showed, let's imagine we have customers that don't have localization project managers and they use Lokalise to do that for them. So they definitely don't know best practices, and they rely on reading as much as they can beforehand to get started. So internationalizing and preparing your design for internationalization and accessibility guarantees more success during the localization process. So much of what is done in localization is done outside of the scope of work of the localization project manager, instead the product manager and the designers. And we see more and more of that the more ingrained localization becomes interdepartmentally.
Absolutely. And oh, that could be another session in itself. And we will. I know one day we'll get to all those good things. Okay, so any other questions about how Lokalise works? I think, did we get through everything? Let's see. Magali, do you notice any other questions while you're taking notes?
No, I
Okay.
think we answered everything.
Yay.
Awesome. If I may, Marina, after I finish, I did want to check with Mario to see if he had anything left to add to our call today.
Thanks, Eric. Now, I just want to say thank you very much again to everyone who attended. And at the beginning, I missed to thank Marina as well for giving us this opportunity and to make it happen so quickly. You are truly an example of a localization advocate, and thank you for this community and for allowing us to network and learn more. It's really appreciated. And in regards to everyone who is here in this call, if you guys have any other questions, please reach out. If you have any feedback, positive or negative, please reach out. And if you're looking to get the free trial and to try and play with Lokalise a little bit, and you want to leverage your time with the free trial, please reach out. Okay, we are here to help. We are here to make your experience as, let's say, as good as possible.
Yeah.
So please reach out, and thank you for the time. Okay, that's it for me.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Thank you, everyone who joined from all over. It's a privilege to show our tool to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Eric and Mario, and everybody in the group. I want to show you in the chat. By the way, everybody can download the chat and kind of keep track of what was discussed in there. And then take a look. I've uploaded, Lokalise has kindly provided a one-pager that has some information right there. So go find that file. It was uploaded about 2 minutes ago. Download that. And then also, please note in the Localization Advocate LinkedIn page, go there and follow if you haven't already, and tell your colleagues and friends. This is a community. Localization Advocate is a consulting business that I've started, but there's so much of us doing this Loc Tools study. There's so much more to study and all the things that we're doing. So come back to the Localization Advocate page on LinkedIn. I will place the recording once it's done. I have the localization or the collaboration tools video. I'm still working on that as well. So both of those videos will be coming out. And then Magali will thank you so much for doing notes for us. And we're going to just circle back and put it all together. Check out the events calendar for our next sessions coming up. And it's just been a privilege to be here with everyone. And thanks again, Lokalise. And thanks everybody on the call. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.